Hello again. We are returning to the concept of for loops, but now we're going to add just a little bit more information into our understanding of these loops. So, right here, I have our example from last time where we were using an accumulator variable to keep track. Now, I'm going to focus in on changing some things inside of our for loops. So, first off is our counter variable. When we first start off, we always set our counter variables to 0. Now, that number can change. So, this is where things actually get quite interesting. I could set count to 1, and instead of starting at 0, it's going to count to 1. So, my program is going to change in the way that it runs. When I'm doing my test expression, I am not limited to less than and then a number. I could do less than and equal to. I could do greater than and equal to. I can do this however I choose. So the count variables and the test expressions are pretty flexible. Now, the incrementer is where I really wanted to focus on today. Now, the way that I have it right now, where you do your variable and then plus plus, that only ever adds 1 on. Let's say, for example, I wanted to count by 2s or 5s or 7s or 10s. There is a way to rewrite this count statement where I can add more on. And the way that you do that is you do plus equals and then a number. So, for example, count plus equals 2. This is going to take my count variable and it's going to add 2 onto it every single time. So, for my counter variable, I'm going to do count and I'm going to raise it up just a little bit. So, I'm going to go to 10. So, I'll actually start back at 0. And all I want it to do is print my count variable. So what's going to happen is it's going to count by zeros. It's going to start at 2, and then it's going to add 2. So it'll print 2, add 2, print 4. Then it'll be 4, add 2, it'll print 6. Then it'll be 6, add 2, and then print 7. Okay. Now, notice my count is less than 10, and so it stopped once count reached 10. If I change that where it said less than or equal to, it will now run and give me a 10 here. Okay. Now, let's say I wanted to count by 5s. Okay, so I would just come over here to my incrementer section, and instead of just increasing by 2, I'd count by 5s. And just so that you can see the full range of the program, we're going to count to 50. And so there it is. It starts at 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. Now, I do not have to start at 0. If I wanted to, I could have started at 10. And here's what my count would have looked like. It would have skipped 0 and 5 because count starts at 10. And then I just do 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. Now, for loops can count backwards, okay? So if I come over here to my count and I do 2 negatives, that's going to subtract 1 every single time. Now, anytime you are decrementing, that's what it's called when you go backwards by 1, you have to make sure of 2 things. First off, your count variable starts pretty high. So let's say, for example, I'm going to start at the number 15. And instead of count being less than a number, you're going to want count to be greater than 0. This prevents you from counting backwards into the negatives. And so now if I start this program, it's going to start at 15 and then count backwards by 1 all the way down to 0. Now, just like I did before, if I wanted to count by more than 1, let's say I wanted to count backwards by 3s, I would do minus equal 3s. And so that is going to subtract 3 each time. So when I run my program, it's going to go 15, 12, 9, 6, 3. Now, if I want it to include a 0, when I come over here to my test expression, I'm going to go count is greater than or equal to 0. And 0 will now be an option for my program. So for loops and I'm just going to repeat myself here a little bit. They have their three sections. You have your variable, which you keep track of your counter. You have your test expression, and you have your incrementer, which is the change for your variable. Now, some of you might be looking at my example and going, wait, this doesn't match some of what I've seen. If you are looking at this count variable, and in your examples, you're seeing the letter I, that is very, very common notation for a for loop. So if this looks more like what you are used to, that's perfectly fine. I prefer to use the word count because that's a variable that actually tells me what it does. It counts the number of times that my for loop is running. I is usually considered short for the word index, which is another word for counter. So if in a lot of examples you're seeing variable I and it looks more like that, it doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means that I used a different variable name. You can call this variable whatever you want, but typically limit it to a word or a term that you are going to recognize. So if you have any questions on these for loops, please let me know. I know this video went pretty fast, so if you need to watch it a couple of times, please feel free.